I'm Caleb, 32, and sometimes I feel like my family has turned favoritism into a sport. You know how people joke about the golden child versus the forgotten one? In my family, it isn't a joke. It's practically tradition. My brother Ethan is the star, while I'm just the guy they call when the Wi-Fi goes down. Last Christmas should have been my warning sign that things were getting worse. My wife and I had saved for weeks to buy thoughtful gifts. Even though money is tight, she crocheted matching scarves for my parents. I tracked down a rare vinyl record my dad had been searching for since the 80s, and we bought Ethan's kids a Lego set they'd been begging for all year. We walked in with arms full of bags, the house smelling like cinnamon and pine, proud we had managed on our budget. But when it was time for gifts, my mom cleared her throat and said softly, "Caleb, I'm so sorry. We couldn't afford presents for your kids this year." I nodded and told my kids to sit quietly, pretending it didn't hurt. I thought maybe money was truly tight, until I watched Ethan's kids unwrap iPads, designer sneakers, and personalized leather jackets. The living room looked like a holiday ad, with Ethan soaking up credit while my parents pitched in. I forced a smile, but inside I was twisting. My daughter Emma, just 7, tried to hide her disappointment, but couldn't. My son Max stayed silent, holding the book we'd brought for Grandpa. As we left, Dad patted my shoulder and said, "Times are hard, son. Next year will be better." I bit my tongue, because I knew the truth. Dad had just received a bonus. Mom was still posting spa day selfies, and Ethan had bragged online about the new truck Dad co-signed. We drove home in silence. My wife squeezed my hand once, the kids asleep in the back seat. What I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was a hollow realization that something in me had shifted. That night, I stayed up scrolling through old family photos, wondering when I stopped being a priority. Was it choosing trade school instead of college like Ethan, becoming a mechanic instead of an engineer, or simply because I don't make them look good at gatherings? The next morning, the group chat was full of pictures of Ethan's kids showing off gifts. Mom gushed about how blessed she felt. Dad joked about Santa's helpers. No one mentioned my kids. Not one word. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering, but something in me decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to swallow it this time, and that's when the idea began forming. The week after Christmas, we had the usual casual brunch at my parents'. Really just another chance for everyone to act like nothing happened. Normally I'd skip, but my wife suggested we go. Maybe clear the air, though I could tell she didn't believe that either. Pulling up, I saw Ethan's shiny new truck with its custom grille and rims, worth more than my entire car. He greeted me with a beer in hand, eager to brag. "Check it out, little bro. Dad even helped upgrade the suspension. You should think about trading up." I forced a nod, thinking about how I'd been patching my old hatchback just to keep it running. Inside, Mom hummed cheerfully while setting the table, as if she hadn't just excluded my kids from Christmas. Over brunch, every topic circled back to Ethan, his promotion, his truck, his kids' private school options. Mom beamed with pride like she was the one being promoted. When my wife casually mentioned that Max had earned a school award, Mom smiled politely before pivoting back to Ethan's daughter's piano recital. My kids may as well have been invisible. Then came dessert. Mom clinked her glass and announced, "Since we stepper all together, we decided to start a family fund." Dad smiled like it was a generous gesture. "Everyone chips in monthly, so we can help each other, emergencies, birthdays, vacations, keep things fair." My stomach dropped at that word, fair. Mom added, "We know you've been struggling, Caleb, and we want to support you." For a second, I almost believed her. Then Ethan chimed in, "Yeah, and it'll help with stuff like new tablets for school or big birthday parties." I froze. Was this really about funding more gifts for his kids? I pushed back, pointing out my children didn't even get socks while theirs received designer jackets. The room went silent. Dad gave his usual chuckle, saying, "We had to cut back this year." I shot back. "Cut back on what? Vacations? Truck upgrades?" Ethan smirked and said, "Hey, don't blame me for doing well." That was when I realized there was no clearing the air. They didn't see the favoritism, or worse, they did and didn't care. I let it go in the moment for my kids' sake, but later I sat in the garage, cold and heavy with thought. When my wife asked if I was okay, I told her no, but I knew what I had to do. Over the next weeks, the family chat filled with updates about Ethan's kids, ski lessons, recital costumes, reminders about the family fund with amounts that were unrealistic for us. I stayed silent until Mom called. "Caleb, honey, did you see the message about the fund? Your brother already contributed." "Of course he had," she added. "We just want equal opportunities. You don't want your kids left out, do you?" I actually laughed, short and bitter. "They're already left out, Mom. You made sure of that at Christmas." She grew sharp. "Don't be cruel, Caleb. We love your kids. We're doing what's best for the family." I hung up before I said something worse, realizing this wasn't just favoritism anymore, it was manipulation. Then Dad texted me, "Reminder about the fund. Since Ethan's kids have big expenses coming up, you could double your first contribution. You don't want them to miss out, right?" I stared at the screen, feeling that same cold click inside me. No, I wasn't going to bankroll Ethan's life while my kids went unseen. The idea I'd been holding on to started to grow, sharper, clearer. I didn't just want to opt out. I wanted them to feel what we felt. A few weeks later, Mom sent a group message, "Family dinner this Saturday. Everyone's coming." No explanation, just expectation. I almost skipped, but my wife reminded me they'd just accused me of being dramatic. So we went. The house was buzzing. The table set like a holiday feast, candles and fine china. I was confused until I saw the massive pile of wrapped boxes in the living room. "What's all this?" I asked. Mom smiled wide. "Oh, we wanted to do something special for the grandkids." When I first saw the mountain of gifts at that dinner, a small part of me felt a cautious hope. Maybe this was their way of making up for Christmas. Maybe they were finally trying to include my kids. Ethan's children came running in, shouting with excitement, asking if it was time to open them. Mom clapped her hands and told them to go ahead. Wrapping paper flew, headphones, branded clothes, even a Nintendo Switch. I glanced at Emma. Her face lit up for just a moment, like she believed this was for her too. She sat quietly, waiting. But then I realized there was nothing for her, nothing for Max. Not a single box with their names. Before I could ask, Mom gave me a sympathetic smile. "Oh, sweetheart, we thought we stead wait to get something for your two. Once the family fund is set up, that way they won't stead feel shortchanged. If we can set match what Ethan Sepp's kids receive." I stared at her. "So Ethan Sepp's kids get everything now, and mine wait?" Dad nodded like it made sense. "Exactly. That way it's Sepp's fair." I laughed, but it wasn't set from humor. "Fair? This is fair?" Ethan raised a brow. "They Sepp just gifts. Caleb, Don Sepp make it bigger than it is." But it was bigger. Emma's face fell, her shoulders slumping, as she quietly slipped off the couch and sat by the window. Max stayed still, gripping the chair so tight, his knuckles went pale. My wife caught my eye, her jaw tight, but she stayed silent. She knew this was mine to handle. I stood slowly. "We stir leaving." Mom blinked. "Dawn set be ridiculous. Dinner Sepp's almost ready." "No," I repeated, louder this time. "We said are leaving now." I gathered the kids and walked out, ignoring Ethan's chuckle behind me. My wife followed without a word. The car ride home was silent. Only after the kids were asleep did I finally let it out. "I Sepp done," I told my wife, pacing the kitchen, "completely done." They didn't forget this time, they planned it. They invited us just to watch our kids sit empty-handed while Ethan Sips got everything. She nodded. I know, and they expected you to smile through it. I sat heavily at the table, shaking my head. Sep been swallowing this for years. The favoritism, the digs, the way they put Ethan on a pedestal. But tonight was different. She leaned forward. Then stop letting them do it. Stop showing up for them when they won't show up for you. Her words stuck with me. The next morning, I woke up to missed calls from Mom, one from Dad, and a cheerful text from Ethan. Sorry if we made things awkward last night. Mom says you overreacted. Don't take it personally. The kids had a great time. I stared at it until the screen went black. Then came the final straw. 2 days later, while I was at work, the group chat lit up. Photos of a huge backyard party. Balloons, banners, catering trays. Mom's caption, surprise party for Sophie. Couldn't wait. She deserves this. It was the party they'd been planning. The one they asked me to contribute to through the family fund. I hadn't given a dime, but they held it anyway and never told us. Photo after photo showed Ethan's kids, opening more presents, my parents smiling, relatives laughing, not a single empty chair, except the ones where my family should have been. That night, Emma curled up on my lap. Daddy, why don't we go to the fun parties anymore? I didn't have an answer. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't favoritism anymore. It was exclusion. Intentional, calculated. And I realized they weren't going to change. If I wanted to protect my kids and stop being treated as the forgotten one, I'd have to do something drastic. After Sophie's party, the house felt different. Heavier. The kids were quieter. Emma stopped asking when we'd see my parents again. Max stayed in his room, reading. My wife and I shared silent looks. We both knew something had permanently shifted. Even at work, people noticed. You good, man? My coworker Drew asked one night. I shrugged, muttered something about family, and left before he could press. The group chat only made it worse. Updates from Ethan's new house, clips of his kids playing their Switch, Mom planning a spring vacation. Clearly, we weren't invited. I muted the chat. I didn't leave, at least not yet, but I couldn't keep watching cheerful updates while my kids sat at home asking questions I couldn't answer. One night, I sat in the garage, staring at the tools on the wall, the smell of oil grounding me. My wife came out. You can't keep doing this to yourself, she said gently. I know, I said flatly, but if I stop showing up completely, they sit'll just say I sit difficult, that I don't wanna be part of the family. She sat beside me, hand on my knee. You don't owe them your peace of mind, just to avoid their gossip. Her words hit me. I realized I'd been performing, smiling through gritted teeth at gatherings, just to avoid being called the problem. And for what? It didn't stop them from excluding my kids. It didn't stop the money requests. It didn't stop the party they held behind our backs. Something had to change. So I started small. I stopped volunteering to host, stopped rearranging my schedule for their events. I put my kids' activities first, even if it meant missing Sunday dinners. Mom noticed at first. One evening she called, her tone sharp. Caleb, we didn't see you at brunch. Everything okay? Yeah, I said evenly. Max had a science project due. We stayed home. Well, you could come after. We didn't want to. I cut in. A pause. Then her cold reply. I see. After that, her calls came less often, but pulling away didn't erase the pain. If anything, it gave me room to feel it. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat scrolling old photos. One from Max's 5th birthday. My dad holding him, both smiling, frosting on his face. Back then, I believed my parents loved my kids the same as Ethan's. Now I wasn't so sure. I realized I was mourning something that wasn't gone. but maybe it needed to be. The breaking point came soon after. On a rainy Saturday, Dad called. "Hey son," he said, casually. "Listen, Ethan Sepp's truck payment came due earlier than expected. We thought this would be a good chance for the family fund to kick in." I froze. "There is no family fund, Dad. Not one I agreed to." He sighed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. It sets just one payment. You can afford it." I laughed. Short, sharp. "You sit for asking me, the one whose kids got nothing for Christmas, to pay for Ethan Sepp's truck." Sepp's got a lot on his plate," Dad said irritably. "He can do it all." "Neither can I snapped. "But you don't seem to care about that." "Watch your tone," he barked. I hung up. My hands shook, my heart pounding. That was the moment something inside me locked into place for good. This wasn't about keeping the peace anymore. It wasn't about staying part of the family. It was about respect. And I wasn't going to get it by asking. That night, while my kids watched a movie, I opened my laptop. Bank statements, tax returns, property files. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to be ready. When I made my move, it had to be undeniable. Once I stopped begging for respect, it was like a weight lifted. The next morning, I woke with clarity, like I'd finally set something down I'd been carrying for years. The first step, taking a hard look at our finances. I stayed up late, line by line, not just trying to survive anymore, but thinking strategically. If my family insisted on treating us like we were second class, then I would make sure we never needed them again. So I cut out everything that wasn't essential. I cut out old subscriptions and stopped impulse spending. A friend had been asking me to help with car restorations, so I finally said yes. Weekends that used to be spent at family gatherings were now spent in the shop, working on engines. For the first time, I didn't mind. Every extra dollar went straight into savings. My wife noticed the change first. One night she said, "You seem lighter." I told her I was. It felt like I had stopped playing their game. The side work began paying off faster than I expected. Within a few months, we had cleared the last debt we'd carried since Emma was born. That relief gave us breathing room, and with it, new ideas. A coworker mentioned a small commercial garage for sale. It wasn't fancy, but it had potential. 3 bays, a waiting area, and steady customers. The retiring owner was selling it cheap. At first I hesitated, but my wife pushed me. "You've been running half a shop for years. Why not run your own?" So we did. We used all our savings, took a small loan, and signed the papers. The first months were tough, long days and nights, but the shop was ours. I invested everything: new tools, fresh paint, a logo Emma helped design. Max set up a small corner with coffee and coloring books for kids. Word spread quickly. People liked that we were local, family-run, and straightforward. Within 6 months, business was thriving. I hired 2 more employees, and even gave myself a modest raise. It wasn't only about money, it was about control. For the first time, I wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. My parents still sent texts with updates, but I noticed their tone shifting. They were less boastful, more curious. "How's the shop?" Dad would ask. My replies stayed short. "Good, nothing more." Then one Friday evening, while closing the shop, a customer came in needing urgent repairs. I stayed late to finish. When he returned, he handed me cash with a $100 tip, saying I had saved his weekend. I went home with grease on my hands, grinning. My wife laughed when I showed her and hugged me tightly. In that moment, I realized we weren't just surviving anymore, we were moving forward. The kids noticed too. Emma talked about saving for piano lessons. Max wanted a treehouse. Small things, but they showed we were finally building something of our own. Meanwhile, my parents and Ethan kept sending event invites, always tied to money or work. I ignored most of them. One afternoon, Mom called. She said they were planning a big family dinner and wanted us there. Then, lowering her voice, she added, "Ethan mentioned the business is doing well. We're so proud of you." I recognized the fishing, she continued, suggesting a fundraiser for the family fund at the dinner and hinted I could help by contributing generously. I smiled, because they still thought I was the same Caleb who paid quietly to keep peace. But I wasn't anymore. I had leverage now, independence, savings, and a growing business. If they wanted me on display at their dinner, I'd give them something real to talk about. That call stayed with me. It wasn't about the request, it was about how she said it, like I was being cast in a family performance. I decided I wouldn't just refuse their request, I would use that dinner as a stage of my own. I told my wife my plan at the kitchen table one night. Bills pushed aside. "They expect me to hand them money," I said. She asked what I was going to do. For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. "Not what they think." I explained I had kept records, screenshots, messages, even Dad's voicemail asking me to cover Ethan's truck payment. She asked what I'd do with them. I admitted I didn't know yet, but I knew I wouldn't walk in as the same Caleb. From then on, I gathered everything: years of texts, proof of favoritism, all the times my kids had been excluded. Seeing it laid out was sobering. It wasn't one bad holiday. It was a long pattern. One text stood out. Mom writing, "Don't invite Caleb's family. He'll complain about the cost." That was proof it wasn't oversight, but deliberate. That's when my plan shifted from distancing myself to confronting it directly. Meanwhile, the shop kept expanding. One afternoon, an older customer, Mr. Lawson, came in with a classic car. While we talked, he mentioned he owned the property where my shop was located. He told me when the unit next door opened, I'd have first chance at it. Expansion, more bays, more income. It gave me another card to play. I tightened everything: finances, records, savings, so no one could paint me as the struggling son. Then, a week before the dinner, Ethan messaged, "Heads up, Mom's making a big announcement. Don't bail." I suspected it was about the family fund, maybe to put me on the spot. I replied simply, "We'll be there." Inside, though, I was ready. For years, gatherings filled me with dread. But this time, I felt something new: confidence. I wasn't going in on their terms anymore. When I saw Ethan's grin from across the room and heard my mom say, "There's my boy. We're so glad you made it," I just smiled. They had no idea what was coming. That night, we arrived right on time, a first for us. Normally, we'd rush in late, trying to catch up. Not this time. I walked in steady, holding the door for my wife and kids. Emma carried a drawing for her grandma. Max brought fresh bread from a local bakery. The house was packed with family: grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Ethan stood near the kitchen, drink in hand, watching me. Mom hugged me brightly. "So glad you could make it." "And bread, perfect." I replied evenly, "Wouldn't miss it." Dinner was noisy as usual, but I didn't fade into the background. I asked cousins about their work, laughed at my uncle's stories, even added a few of my own. For once, I felt in control. But the key moment came after dessert. Mom tapped her glass and stood. "Everyone, if I could have your attention. We wanted to share something exciting tonight." I knew what was coming. She spoke about making the family fund official, supporting each other, ensuring the kids never went without, keeping the family strong. People murmured approval. Ethan stood beside her and added, "We're asking everyone to contribute, whatever you can. But we thought it would be nice if Caleb kicked things off, set the tone." All eyes turned to me. In the past, I would have panicked, pulled out my wallet, and overpaid just to avoid judgment. Not this time. I smiled. "I'd be happy to start," I said, placing the folder I'd brought onto the table. "But before we do, I think it's important we all understand what family support really means. Mom frowned slightly. What do you mean? I pulled out the first page, a printed text where she'd written not to invite us on vacation because I'd complain about costs. I read it aloud. The room went quiet. Then I laid down another, the message asking me to double my contribution for Ethan's kids' expenses, then the photo of Sophie's surprise party we weren't invited to, then Dad's voicemail about covering Ethan's truck payment. One by one, I placed them on the table, calmly explaining what each meant for me and my kids. No shouting, no tears, just facts. By the time I finished, the table was silent. Ethan's smirk was gone. Mom looked stunned. Dad's jaw was tight. So, I said finally, leaning back, before we discuss contributions, I want to be clear. We won't be participating. I let it sit, then continued. We've been excluded from birthdays, vacations, even Christmas. And every time we stayed quiet to keep the peace. That ends tonight. I'm not teaching my kids that silence equals respect. My wife squeezed my hand under the table. You want a family fund? I said, looking at my parents. Fine. But do it without us. We Citra not paying for other people's sips parties while our kids are left out. Nobody spoke until Ethan scoffed. Really dramatic, Caleb. You could Sev just said no. I turned to him, steady. I did say no, many times. You just didn't want to hear it. His face reddened, but before he could reply, I pulled out one last page, my business card showing me as shop owner, with a note about upcoming expansion. I don't need your money. I don't need your fund. The only thing I need is distance. I stood, gathered my family, and headed for the door. You wanted me to set the tone, I said quietly. Consider it set, and we left. The drive home was silent at first, but not the heavy silence of past months. This one felt lighter. Emma broke it. Daddy, she asked. You didn't yell. I glanced in the mirror. Didn't need to. Max nodded. You told the truth. And he was right. That's exactly what I wanted them to see. When we got home, my phone was full of missed calls and texts. I set it down and ignored it. By morning, the calls started again. Mom was first. I can't believe you embarrassed us last night, she snapped. I didn't embarrass you, I replied calmly. I told the truth. You didn't have to do it in front of everyone. Yes, I did. If I said it privately, you would brushed it off. This way, no one can pretend it didn't happen. She went quiet, then added, you upset your father. Good, I said. Maybe next time he'll think twice before asking me to pay for Ethan's truck, she gasped, calling me cruel. Not cruel, I answered. Clear. And I hung up. Over the next days, the fallout spread. One aunt texted, saying she'd seen how my parents treated us, but stayed silent out of guilt. A cousin called to apologize for never inviting my kids to their pool parties, admitting she just followed Grandma's lead. Even my grandparents sent a card that read, "We're proud of you for standing up for your family." The loudest reaction came from Ethan. He called, furious. You think you sitter a hero. You made everything worse. Mom has stopped crying. Maybe she should ask herself why, I replied. This family was fine until you made it about you, he snapped. I almost laughed. This family has always been about you, Ethan. I just said it out loud. Then I ended the call. Don't contact me unless it to apologize. For the first time in years, the house felt calm. A few weeks later, my parents showed up at the shop. My stomach tensed, but I wiped my hands and met them outside. Caleb, Dad said gruffly. Dad, I replied evenly. After a long pause, Mom spoke softly. We didn't realize how bad it had gotten. We thought you didn't mind. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't mind my kids being excluded? Didn't Stet mind being asked to pay for things we weren't Stet invited to? She winced. We didn't Stet think about it that way. I didn't Set ease the tension. I meant what I said. I Sept am done pretending. If you want to be part of my kids' Sept lives, it has to be equal. No secret parties, no favoritism, no guilt trips. Dad shifted uncomfortably. And if we can Set promise that, then you one Set see us. Simple as that. Silence stretched before Mom finally nodded. We'll try. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. That weekend, Mom messaged the family group chat. Dinner at our place Sunday. Everyone invited. When we arrived, 4 gift bags waited at the door. 2 for Ethan's kids, 2 for mine. Emma's face lit up seeing hers, and something inside me loosened. It wasn't perfect, and maybe never would be, but it was different. As I watched my kids laugh and join in, I realized this was the real shift. Not the silence I'd left behind, not the evidence I'd laid out, but the fact that my kids were finally treated as though they mattered. On the drive home, Emma leaned forward. Daddy? Yeah, kiddo. That was fun. For the first time in a long while, I smiled and meant it. Yeah, I said. It was. And in that moment, I knew the game had changed.